Hi all, I just wanted to do a quick video about something on my mind at the moment, the importance of trying to check all the forcing variations as a priority. So even maybe you're going to get short of time, it's important to try and check them even in maybe 5-minute chess, because I think that discipline's good. Now this is one of my past videos. I'm going to go to 551 to review this one. So 551, and this was a more pleasant example actually, because I managed to find a useful tactic. See, knight d2 check. Now before knight d2, if we rewind that, the position is starting to get maybe a little bit tricky, you know, with f7, so it's a great simple solution that wins the game immediately. So the other forcing moves that you might consider, even if they're absurd, even if they're totally absurd, knight c3 check should be really examined. You know, it might do something in a different position. Knight d2 check. Anything else which is really that forcing. Queen c3 doesn't threaten mate because it's all protected, but you can look at totally absurd moves. Maybe queen g1 you can consider a forcing move. In fact, it does threaten the rook, and if it takes, you can consider knight d2. So in this position, I managed to consider a seemingly absurd knight d2, but it's actually disrupting back row protection. But let's have a look at another example. So I'm going to put the video ID in, and I've recorded at the point of interest for this discussion, so 605. So this was a less lucky game against than I am. At 605, I think I was annoyed at the exchange of queens. So let's just hear the emotional reaction for.
So he's got lots of chances now. It's not a major disaster, is it? Still got lots of threats and pressure.
Okay, I was disappointed by the exchange of queens. Now, if we examine by force all the forcing moves in this position, I'll just go to rook d4.
Oh, 1 minute 35 though. So he's got lots of chances now.
You see, the thing is, I guess even in 5 minutes you could have this sort of very strict discipline that you could say to yourself, I'll definitely try and check out all the forcing moves even if I get very short of time. Obviously you've got to have common sense with these things. You don't want to run completely out of time. But here, what would be the absolute forcing moves? Rook a4 check, okay, fine, he takes rook. Then there's knight b1 check, absurd, you know, he takes. But, you know, examine them anyway, even if they're absurd. Knight b5 check, and in fact knight b5 check is not absurd. It doesn't lose a knight. It is a forcing check, and in fact it would win the rook. And I missed that. I played the move quite quickly just because I didn't want the exchange of rooks. I wanted to keep the pressure on. So here's the commentary. You see, that I think is a lack of discipline, which might in fact creep into longer games. You know, we're at the game in the over the ball recently where I missed g4 because you know, I played bishop f5 casually. If you're trying to force yourself to at minimum check the forcing variations, then I think you become aware actually of tactical vulnerabilities more. So another example recently was in this video. This is another game I lost, and it could have been a different story. If we go to 1 minute 28. So he's just played bishop f4. My reaction here is slight panic, because I don't want to lose my light square bishop, because it looks slicing. It looks as though it's stopping castling kingside and queenside. But okay, this is a forcing move, bishop f4. But with the opponent's forcing moves, also you've got to look above the horizon, you know, what they've seen. Okay, they've seen queen f4, bishop e6, but is there a forcing move there? In fact, there would have been. You can imagine queen f4, bishop e6 forced. What forcing move exists there? You can threaten mate. Any mate threats in one, especially. But especially in the elephant gambit, they haven't got defensive knight and f3. It's logical that tactical vulnerability would exist more. You know, the pawn's driven away the knight. So if I'd taken, and in fact taking knight g4, actually there's only like one move virtually. Not h3 because queen h2, g3, and then actually another forcing move, queen h6, and I'll be eyeing h2 and the bishop. Engine checking, I'm just winning a piece here. So queen takes f4, was winning. In the game, this is what happened.
Oh, blimey.
Just queen d7, and then eventually, you know, I lost. So maybe, just maybe, there's a principle. Maybe it's common sense. There are very key variations in any position, which, even though they're totally absurd, like checks sometimes, one of those checks might actually just be winning on the spot. You're going from A to B by force to a winning destination. So I think it's very important to, you know, to calculate by default, even in 5-minute chess maybe, as a discipline, to try and calculate, you know, the variations which are you could call them guaranteed if-then conditions, because they're sort of guaranteed. When you do a general analysis, you know, which is not forcing variations, then there's no guarantee. You might as well just think positionally a lot of the time, you know, rather than try and be like a computer, you know, with like cut-off candidate moves. But in terms of guaranteed if-thens, you know, if the opponent does this, you do this. It's a guaranteed if-then sequence here. Then after, you know, queen takes f4, bishop takes e6. You know, if knight g4, then it's virtually forced g3. Then if queen h3, well, has to defend again with h4, and then queen takes e6. Okay, you could examine bishop f7, bishop d7 in principle, because they're forcing moves, but they're harmless. The king on the knight just takes. But the principle's there, that even if moves are absurd, you know, check them out. You're not going to spend that much time checking out the absolutely forced variations in the position. And I believe, and please report to this video if you do find success tactically, that you start to see more combinations and you start to improve your tactics. So the rigor, perhaps just say to yourself, even in your blitz, even if I get short of time, I want to try and look at more of the forcing variations. Even if they're absurd or I'm short on time, try and look at the forcing variations as a priority. And, you know, let me know if you have any tactical success with a stricter approach to this. So that's what I really wanted to emphasize with this video, the importance of checking forcing variations, even in 5-minute chess. Okay, I'm just going to make some further observations about one of the key examples with chess-based light here. So bishop f4 was played, and strategically, if I'm thinking strategically, I want a castle either side, especially like kingside. So the idea of a bishop landing on e6 is very unpleasant to think about strategically. That's why in the title I've even talked about this idea, this notional concept of having your own docking computer, not a computer chess program, but thinking, you know, mentally, conceptually, as part of your conceptual toolkit, that as well as thinking strategically, you might also have a sort of virtual docking computer which checks out all the forcing variations, because this is otherwise this is shortcut here with evaluation. The evaluation would completely shortcut calculating any further, because you'd think, well, strategically I can't castle, the bishop's stopping me castle, and also, you know, the light squares are vulnerable. The docking computer is ruthless, should be ruthless for your opponent. Doesn't matter if they're Kasparov, a super GM on the ICC auto pairing, whatever. If you have a mental docking computer separate, you would have to consider knight g4, threaten the mate. We can do this, even though it's if-then calculation. We can do basic if-thens, not looking at millions of positions like a computer, but looking at the more guaranteed ones. So knight g4 forces g3, and now another very forcing move, threatening mate in one again, and white will end up losing the piece. But as I say, often we're thinking strategically, you know, control of the centre, creating pass pawns, avoiding losing key bishops. So you're finding often resources as you try and improve your positional play, which are relevant strategically. So I think you know, that also involves some calculations and evaluations to try and get a position which you like, but it shouldn't be shortcutting the kind of docking computer which we can all have to look at basic if-then guaranteed conditions. I'm not talking about Kotov's full tree of analysis. I'm taking a very small set of that, the trees with low branching, the forcing variations in particular. are the more guaranteed ones. I think that they're very, very important. Perhaps even in blitz, even if you're short of time, you totally respect your opponent. You're thinking strategically a lot of the time. You know, turn on this virtual docking computer, and I think it will pay results and dividends. I'm not saying for you to cheat with engines. I'm talking about a mental concept here about checking the forced if-then sequences separate for your main strategic thinking. I'm not saying it's a mode of thought in general. You've got to keep your positional reasoning going at all times. You know, chess is a very positional game. It's not just, you know, forcing stuff. But this is very important here, though, as an example, I think, that there's a strategic shortcutting of calculation here, that I'm just going to lose the light square bishop. So I just wanted to re-emphasize that. And please report back any tactical results or phenomena you experienced as a result of this video. Please try and look at the title page of the video. I put at 15 seconds for the even ifs, because I want to try and see if I can create greater discipline in you guys in your own games for checking the forcing variations. But don't abandon positional, you know, reasoning. You know, usually this would be bad to lose the light square bishop. In most cases, you know, as a generalization, as a positional evaluation, if the king wasn't there, it was somewhere else. This is losing, you know, potentially valuable light square bishop. But, you know, a separate thoughts have to be put somewhere for checking this stuff out. Okay, so comments or questions on YouTube? Thanks very much.